It's time now for County-Wide, a presentation of Yavapai Broadcasting News. You'll hear about the interesting issues and happenings that affect all our lives. Here's today's County-Wide.
Good day and welcome to the program. I'm Brad Miller. It's County-Wide, and this is the second of two parts with our guests from the previous show, Sonja Soto and Dr. Sam Downing, and talking really about a guide model, a dementia navigator it's being called. It's something kind of new, a new direction in this very broad field of dementia and memory care for typically aging folks, but certainly not exclusively. Sonja is with the Cunningham Center for Compassionate Aging. Dr. Sam Downing at Dignity YRMC. And again, we thank you for coming and visiting with us today. We kind of got rolling in our first segment, a lot of things specifically about the program, Sonja, and we'll continue along that. But I want to turn, as we start with Dr. Downing, and talk a little bit about, we talk an awful lot about care. We talk about caregivers. When we're talking about dementia, we don't talk much about prevention. And I'd like you to, help us with some understanding.
So in the past, and even up to today, our treatment availability options that people would have when diagnosed with dementia at best slow the process down.
Yeah.
They don't really reverse it.
There's no cure.
There is no cure, and that's a critical piece. So what a lot of the studies have focused on in the last several years is if changes in our brain start early in life, what things can we do that might actually keep our brain as strong as possible? And I oftentimes will say, most people don't want their bodies to outlast their brains.
Right.
And as we live older, which in this generation, the average man can expect to live to maybe around age 79 or 80, and women in the early 80s up to 84 is their average age.
Right.
So people are living into their 80s and 90s, and they want to be vibrant, they want to be functional, and they want to have a brain that's working for them.
Right.
So there's a handful of things that have been studied closely that demonstrate preventative impact to prevent dementia. So, and these are almost like common sense, no duh sorts of things, right?
What grandma told you.
Exactly right. So exercise filters to the top,
Sure.
Regular exercise
Right.
is very important. And as I think about it physiologically, it just makes sense to me that if we can enhance circulation to our brain, it's probably going to make a difference in keeping that brain a little healthier.
You bet.
Diet makes a big difference as well.
Sure.
And so there's more focus on what was lovingly called a Mediterranean type diet,
Right.
which is a diet that's low in fat, high in fresh fruits and vegetables and fibers, limited alcohol, to be honest with you. Some Mediterranean diets are a little bit more liberal with alcohol, but alcohol in an aging brain is not helpful, just to be honest. And the other parts of it that are important are staying well hydrated, again, helping circulation to the brain, presumably. And sleep is coming out as one of the more important things that we do as human beings to help keep our brain strong.
Right. And every one of those things, any doctor of any field or any discipline will tell you are good ideas.
Common sense stuff,
all the way
right?
around.
But
nicotine, smoking.
so nicotine and smoking, and interestingly, kind of goes similarly, air pollution. People who grow up and spend a lot of time in urban areas where there's a lot of pollutants in the air are at increased risk for dementia.
Wow.
And so smoking for sure can impact that for two reasons. One is limits oxygen supply to the brain, but also cuts down the size of the small blood vessels that get the important blood to our brain. And as the same way that they can plug up the arteries in the heart, smoking can plug up the arteries in the brain as well.
Okay. And you're talking to, if you're old enough to listen to this program and understand it, these are good advices for anybody.
Sure.
18, 20-year-olds on up.
I think we should be providing this education to elementary age kids so that they start to learn early on the importance of taking care of your brain.
Right.
One other thing I didn't mention that's filtering to the top as well is socialization. There's clear studied benefit that shows our brains do better when we are engaged with other people. And so that could be one caregiver, but it's so much better if it's a loved one plus getting out on a regular basis and socializing with other people. Challenges our brain and stimulates our brain in a way, uses our brain in a way that'll keep it healthier longer.
When Dr. Downing mentioned socialization, Sonja, you very vigorously shook your head in agreement with that. You've seen that impact, the socialization or maybe lack of?
I just definitely see over the course of dementia staging as it progresses, the person living with dementia and also the caregivers, it's harder for them to leave the home
Right.
and go to public places
Right.
or interact with others in places in their community that used to be very comfortable for them. So I know for our family, we had a little card that we carried with us. And when we went to a restaurant or went to a place to shop, we would just hand it to them that says, please be patient. My loved one is experiencing dementia. And it changed how people related to that loved one. And it made it more comfortable for the caregiver to know it's going to be okay when I go out to these public places. So the Alzheimer's Association offers such a card that they can issue to families. But that isolation piece is huge. And I think as we look to our own communities and where people naturally gather, libraries, community centers, airports, things like this, it really is something worth looking into. How can we make those public places more
Right.
dementia friendly
Right.
so that these caregivers and their loved ones are not so isolated?
Well, we're in an age when empathy, just generally speaking, seems to be on the run, and it seems in what you're talking about, that's the word, and that's the direction. Is just try to put yourself in someone else's shoes for 5 minutes.
Yes.
On a retail level, at an airport level, at a screen, a TSA, it can kind of be anything. What you're kind of talking about, both of you, when caregivers kind of see what, say, mom is going through, they're also going to have to face that threat, I would think, very commonly. Is this hereditary, and to what degree? And am I next? What do we know, doctor, about
The genetics. You're talking about genetics, yeah.
Implement, yeah.
Boy, and that is many people's concern once
Sure.
a loved one is diagnosed is, am I next in line,
Right.
or do I have the potential for that? So they've studied the genetics extensively and continue to study the genetics extensively, and there's no single gene that guarantees that somebody's going to be diagnosed with dementia or develop dementia, Alzheimer's disease specifically. But they have found an increased risk associated with that. And if you get a copy of that particular gene, which is called the ApoE gene, you get that copy from your mom and a copy from your dad, your risk goes up to about 40 to 50%. The fascinating thing to me, Brad, is that still means that 50% of people with that double gene may not develop dementia.
Right.
So there's got to be environmental factors that play a role in it as well.
Sure.
So we look at genetics, and we use genetics to determine, sometimes genetic testing, to determine if somebody is eligible for some of the newer treatments that are out there, because we want to be sure that they truly have Alzheimer's disease
Right.
versus some other type of dementia. But I generally find most patients, family members or kids of offspring of folks with dementia, aren't necessarily inclined to get genetic testing too early, because it doesn't really help them understand much more than what their potential risk is. If it helps motivate them to take better care of their brain, it might be a reasonable way to do it. But
bet.
I don't want people anxious or worried that, oh my gosh, I've got the gene, I'm going to get dementia.
There was a few, it might even be a year ago now. It's been a little bit of time. There was a well-known actor. I want to say Chris Hemsworth. I'm not sure it was him. It was one of those Marvel actor type guys who had some such study, and it made the news. It made our little reports here, and it was very anecdotal, and I kind of take all this with a grain of sand. But he was given by someone a 50% likelihood that he would get Alzheimer's. I don't know his family. I don't know any of the rest of the story of that. And again, that's very anecdotal, and I'm hitting you with it in the middle of the show. Is it possible he went and had, because he then became very much an advocate for this kind of testing and taking care of yourself and those kinds of things.
So
does that sound like something that?
So that's
may
that's
have
more
happened?
common these days, and
Okay.
it's more common now because we have blood tests that actually can pick up early markers in the blood that tell us whether somebody may be developing Alzheimer's disease. And so this is
And maybe that was what he did.
well, and this is such a new growing area. All of a sudden, there's a lot of energy, money, and stuff going toward Alzheimer's research, because when I do genetic testing with patients, I will oftentimes say, well, let's also do For instance, there's a scan called an amyloid PET scan. Amyloid is a proteinaceous material that I think just gums up the brain, quite frankly, in Alzheimer's disease. So we can now do a particular scan that will identify amyloid in the brain. So I combine genetic testing with other tests to try to help somebody understand their risk. And again, hopefully then develop a care plan that identifies how we're going to take care of this where you are right now, as well as prevent problems in the future.
Multiple tools to try to find a common piece.
Yep.
Sonja, do you find that commonly with caregivers that mom, it can't not be on their minds?
Right.
If a blood relative, yeah.
Yes, they're very concerned about their own future, of course, while they're caring for that loved one with dementia, but often also for their children. That they want to know if they have a genetic predisposition, so it opens up that conversation to their adult children, and hopefully a generation out will have some better type of interventions that we can do earlier on that will help people with dementia.
Right.
I'm glad that there's so much effort and dollars and research going into the future ability to treat the condition.
Yeah.
For sure.
As we sit here in 2025, we don't know in 50 years on what could happen and where we'll kind of be for it. And that's why we talk about it today, so that there can be happier and more healthful outcomes in the future. We do need to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue. Our guest, Dr. Sam Downing, Sonja Soto, will return to Countywide right after this.
Life changes, then it changes again. Predicting the unexpected in life is impossible. That's why it's called unexpected. So when it comes to financial goals, our philosophy is don't predict, prepare. Hi, I'm Edward Jones financial advisor Matthias Sandoval. A job loss, change in health, or a loss of a loved one can have a big impact on your family's financial security. Let's work together to help make sure you're equipped for life's unexpected events. Call our office to schedule a face-to-face appointment.
Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
Verde Solaire, your hometown heating, air conditioning, and plumbing company in the Verde Valley, and your trusted North Central Arizona Goodman dealer. Goodman is a name you can trust with the revolutionary Comfort Bridge technology factory installed into select Goodman gas furnaces and air handlers to ensure the entire system operates at peak energy efficient performance. Verde Solaire offers free in-home estimates, locally owned and operated since 1983. Visit them at verdesolaire.com. Better, cleaner, faster.
Thank you so very much for your generosity and kindness in helping others. I hope that you take advantage of the many Arizona state tax credits available when giving to qualified charities and schools. If you haven't taken advantage, I hope you'll ask your favorite charity if they qualify. You can go to Arizona Department of Revenue website, search for tax credits, and look at the list of qualifying charities. Then look at your latest Arizona income tax return and see how an Arizona tax credit can benefit many. This is Lewis saying thanks again.
Spring is here, and it's the perfect time for a fresh start. John and Randall Murdoch, your local Farm Bureau agent, is ready to help you simplify and protect what matters most: your home, your car, your life, and your future. John offers competitive pricing with a relationship-first approach that puts you at the center of every decision. Call John and Randall Murdoch today at 928-649-8686, located on Villa Drive in Cottonwood. Farm Bureau Financial Services. It's your future. Let's protect it.
Again, welcome back to the program. It is Countywide. I'm Brad Miller, Sonja Soto, Dr. Sam Downing here. And the big topic we are talking about is Alzheimer's, caregivers for that dread disease. And really kind of in this segment, we're focusing an awful lot on diagnosis and those kinds of things. And Doctor, during our break, you mentioned something I want to share with the listeners. I've read a number of articles recently. I'll be honest, my mother-in-law does not have Alzheimer's. They tell us she's not gotten that official diagnosis. She certainly has memory loss and days when, frankly, she's kind of not all there. She is in assisted care, and that's working very well for her. She had undiagnosed, because she's a very stubborn lady, like her daughter, undiagnosed hearing loss, I would say perhaps even certainly in her 50s, and finally got some hearing aids and things like that. And I know she was in her 70s when she finally kind of did that. Yeah. And we've seen where hearing loss can sometimes be, what would you call it, an indicator or a...
I think it's a risk factor.
A risk factor.
Yeah, and so there are several things that are risk factors, and many of them are tied into our sensory input to our brain. So People with vision loss have an increased risk of dementia. People with hearing loss, there's no question. They've done study after study that demonstrate that hearing loss doesn't cause dementia, but increases the risk of dementia. And the study that's not been completed yet, but I'm anxious to hear or read, is what happens when you do early intervention with, say, hearing aids.
Yeah.
So you improve hearing. Is that going to diminish a person's risk of developing dementia?
Sure.
I believe it will. I don't think it's been clearly proven that way yet, but it is definitely an association that if somebody is not hearing well, at least those parts of the brain are just not getting stimulated the way they normally should. And it does impact things like socialization too.
That was the point of the article I read.
Yeah.
Was that the hearing loss isn't the physicality of it, it's what you're missing in the world that feeds the brains.
And many times people with hearing loss will withdraw from social experiences.
Bingo. Yeah.
Whether they do it sort of consciously or almost subconsciously because they're not as comfortable in social situations or whatever it might be.
Right.
So that's impacting the brain as well.
Yeah. When you kind of slow things down. That puts us back here again that we touched on before, but that puts us back to, there's a very, I've always thought kind of an unkind word for this, shut-ins. Folks who maybe have lost the spouse, don't have a wide circle of friends or associates, have long since retired or don't have a work commitment, that kind of go through that lack of socialization. Mm-hmm. Hearing is fine, or all of these other kinds of things. But that's going to go. And we touched on this, but Sonja, you're, again, nodding your head. You've experienced this in your work.
Yeah, I just would really like to encourage people to utilize the setting that they're in and make it as social as it can be. So in other words, just as they might have an assisted living or memory care facility, they have a schedule for their day, right? They have board game time, and they have music time and dancing time and, meal times and visitation times and things like that. But in your own home setting, you can do so many of those things. Mm-hmm. Alzheimer's Association encourages the use of music at least twice in a day.
There you go. KVRD 105.7. All right.
So get up and dance. Use some type of instrument that they can maybe play.
Right.
It triggers the brain if the music is associated with the years when they were growing up and their brain was more sharp. Right. So if they grew up in the 50s, put the 50s music on, And there's actually a dementia radio that works in that way where you can just hit the genre and that's what it plays. It's internet-based.
Sure.
But I just think there's a lot of things we can do even in our home environment. Invite a friend over. Somebody comes on Wednesday, somebody else comes on Friday, and just to, come and interact with them and have a different face in the home and maybe have a meal or a snack or something like this.
It makes sense.
But yeah, just making that home environment, even for those folks who no longer get out of their home, just to make it as social as it can be.
You mentioned something about board games that made me think that for the longest time we've heard about folks, especially, concerned about memory loss, maybe short of Alzheimer's, but doing crossword puzzles and Sudoku and those kinds of things. Those are beneficial. They can't hurt, it would seem to me. But
I'll give you my bias about that, Brad.
Okay.
And that is that there's an area of the brain that's really good at crossword puzzles.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty small area. Mm-hmm. So you're tickling one part of the brain mm-hmm. that is probably beneficial. It's not harmful. You're absolutely right about that.
Okay.
But does it make a big difference in delaying memory loss without those other components that we've been talking about?
Okay.
Probably not as much.
Okay. It's kind of when you go to the gym, you have leg day, you have arm day and all this, you might need to work the brain out similarly.
Exactly. So you want crossword day, you want socialization day, you want dancing day, music day. That's exactly right. The more we can stimulate our brain from a variety of different sensual experiences, the more likely that brain's going to stay healthy.
Okay. Outstanding. As we kind of edge toward wrapping up our segments here, every time we do a little piece, it feeds us for additional ideas for additional programs that I think we certainly can do in the future. But Sonja, let's kind of round us off all the way back to why we're kind of started here in the first place, and that is talking about this guide, this model that currently we're working with, and it is brand new. July 1. 2025 is where we are right now as we record this program, and the program is starting today. So as we air this show over the course of the next week or months and whatnot, you should be up and running, and folks that want to reach out and find out more can do that.
They sure can. In fact, we have a number of folks already scheduled for
Great.
their initial comprehensive assessment. Guide model also includes a home safety assessment and some support through our foundation for minor home safety modifications and equipment. So we are very excited to get it started, and can't wait to see the impact.
To interrupt a tiny bit, let me just kind of, for our listeners who might have missed our first segment,
Sure.
This is about caregivers is your focus.
Yes, Guide Model is actually the only program across the United States that's focused on caregiver support. I learned in a recent training. Yes, we treat the person living with dementia and their caregiver as a dyad, 2 in 1. And so built into the Guide Model are lots of caregiver support services, respite, benefits, things like this.
Okay. One more time, as we did at the end of our first program, if I could have you repeat that phone number, how they can get in touch with you, or what the best way to do that is.
Sure. So they can call the Cunningham Center for Compassionate Aging in Prescott, and that phone number is 928-775-5567.
Okay. Outstanding. Guys, again, we thank you for what you both do, what you're committed to, what you bring your expertise to help folks in our community. Sonja Soto, Dr. Sam Downing. I'm Brad Miller. It's Countywide, and we'll see you next time.
Life changes, then it changes again. Predicting the unexpected in life is impossible. That's why it's called unexpected. So when it comes to financial goals, our philosophy is don't predict, prepare. Hi, I'm Edward Jones financial advisor Matthias Sandoval. A job loss, change in health, or a loss of a loved one can have a big impact on your family's financial security. Let's work together to help make sure you're equipped for life's unexpected events. Call our office to schedule a face-to-face appointment.
Edward Jones, making sense of investing. Member SIPC.
Verde Solaire, your hometown heating, air conditioning, and plumbing company in the Verde Valley, and your trusted North Central Arizona Goodman dealer. Goodman is a name you can trust with the revolutionary Comfort Bridge technology, factory installed into select Goodman gas furnaces and air handlers to ensure the entire system operates at peak energy efficient performance. Verde Solaire offers free in-home estimates, locally owned and operated since 1983. Visit them at verdesolaire.com. Better, cleaner, faster.
Thank you so very much for your generosity and kindness in helping others. I hope that you take advantage of the many Arizona state tax credits available when giving to qualified charities and schools. If you haven't taken advantage, I hope you'll ask your favorite charity if they qualify. You can go to Arizona Department of Revenue website, search for tax credits, and look at the list of qualifying charities. Then look at your latest Arizona income tax return and see how an Arizona tax credit can benefit many. This is Lewis saying thanks again.
Spring is here, and it's the perfect time for a fresh start. Jonna Randall Murdoch, your local Farm Bureau agent, is ready to help you simplify and protect what matters most: your home, your car, your life, and your future. Jonna offers competitive pricing with a relationship-first approach that puts you at the center of every decision. Call Jonna Randall Murdoch today at 928-649-8686, located on Villa Drive in Cottonwood.